now continue previewing the rest of the weekend's action. Arsenal against Nottingham Forest. We'll hear from Steve Cooper, but first, Mikel Arteta.
The best way after a defeat is to win the next game. That's 100% for sure. And we have a great opportunity on Sunday in front of our crowd. We've been incredibly good at home, and we have to see a different side. We've been in an unbeaten run of 10 games, winning 8 of those against really difficult opponents. And those players as well deserve a lot of credit for what they've done. And it's my responsibility, especially when we lose.
We're just focused on coming up against that team on the weekend, but I have a lot of respect for Arsenal as a club and obviously Mikel as a manager and his players. And it's going to be tough. You know, we're taking it as it comes, and as I repeat, you know, an incredibly tough game away from home, but one that we'll be ready for, one that we're looking forward to, and you know, let's get down there and get to work.
Well, what a victory it was last time out for Nottingham Forest, beating Liverpool in the surprise result of last weekend. That'll give them belief, surely, that they can do it again against Arsenal.
Yeah, absolutely, has to. I think when we saw the midweek game when they played against Brighton, and, you know, they probably could have conceded a few. They left the game, the positive, we've kept a clean sheet. And then they go back home. And I think in that game against Liverpool, I thought they played really well. Obviously, Van Dijk had a couple of chances, and Liverpool could feel that they could have scored. But so could they. I think Alisson made a few really important saves. So what bigger confidence boost do you need than sort of winning a game against a team of that calibre at home in front of those fans? And those players, they needed it. I suppose the only downside is, come the end of the weekend, they were bottom again, because I think Leicester won. Yeah. But that's a huge boost. To be able to see that you can win in the Premier League, it really matters to you, because now you can take positive memories wherever you go. And I think for the Arsenal side, there is something to say about playing Thursday, Sunday. I don't know what it is. I can't quantify it. But I've seen some teams, you always wanted to play against them after they've had a midweek Europa League game, especially away from home. So for Forest, they'll be encouraged. They'll see the Arsenal side might be a bit more tired than perhaps they would be on a different occasion. They can go out and get them and sort of take up the mantle of the underdog, but the underdog that knows.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the last couple of matches, as Nedum says, they picked up a point and then 3 points against Liverpool. They've now got a little bit of belief there. How far can that take them, though? Because you just never know what's going to happen in the next game, and then they end up back down there.
I think the big thing for Forest, don't get cut away at the bottom by the time the World Cup happens, because we've talked about you know, players who are and aren't going to the World Cup. Gianni was talking about, say, Miguel Almiron not going to the World Cup, and what sort of effect will that have on players? I think if there's a team that needs this extended time to work with players, and we talked about it with Brighton and De Zerbi, it's Cooper. Yeah. He can work out who he's got and what his best team is. He's got no time to do that at the moment. And these, like, 5 weeks, 6 weeks could really make Forest's season. So I think for the moment, as Nedum was saying, if they can get in a point where they're not really conceding that many goals, they're picking up a few points, don't get completely marooned at the bottom by the time that the break happens, and then they could be in business after it. Because we've seen in those little moments, and Tyrone Owney is a really good example, they've got quality in there. Yeah.
Are they facing Arsenal at a good time? Because they lost in the Europa League. They didn't score in that game. And last week against Southampton, they looked a little bit flat at times as well. It wasn't their best performance. What do you think?
I think it depends if you're someone who believes the glass is like half full or half empty. Because I think when you look at it, you know, Arsenal's still top of the Premier League. We could say that they're out of form and so on and so forth, but I think they've qualified from the Europa League group, and as I say, they are top of the league, and they know they can get better. So to be able to get the chance to go home and rectify some of the problems they've had gone by, because 2 away games is tough, you know, that's just what it is. Yeah. So I think Arsenal fans will be excited, but maybe there's a little sense of, maybe we believe that this was going to go wrong. Because one thing that I've seen through the season, it's like, it's not distinctly Arsenal, but if you don't talk about them too much to say why they're not respecting us, then you talk about them and say, don't talk about us too much. You know what I mean? Trying to jinx us. Win. It's kind of being caught in between two stalls. But I don't know, I think for Forest, it's always good to play against any team after you've had a win. So they're going away from home, and Arsenal, they're not as free-flowing as, say, they were 2-3 weeks ago. But the fact is that could change in an instant. And they'll know for Forest they need to play well if they want to be in with a chance.
Well, how key has Granit Xhaka been to how good Arsenal have been this season? Are we seeing the best version of him in an Arsenal shirt? Yeah,
I think we are. And I think if Partey's next to him, it really helps. Because, you know, Xhaka was kind of missold, really, when he arrived from Borussia Mönchengladbach, as if he was, you know, the defensive midfielder they needed since they lost Patrick Vieira. And he's quite a good on-ball defender. He's not a great off-ball defender. He kind of loses track of where he is. So if you get him in the opposition half or the final third of the pitch, where he can actually use his passing, which is his biggest asset, where he can get forward and score these goals that we're not really expecting of him. You know, he's had his best goal scoring season for Arsenal already. I think that's a huge advantage. But he's also a big character. And so for that reason, I think this is a big weekend for him as well as Arsenal, because that was a really, really lame performance at PSV. They were totally outclassed, could have been a lot worse. And there are not many times this season where Arteta must have thought, I was really disappointed in my team. But I think he would have felt that on Thursday.
Yeah. How will Arteta get the team back to winning ways this weekend then? What will his words of advice be to the players?
I think it will more so just be a case of starting off well. And I think starting off well in the Premier League for me is starting with a good tempo, not necessarily going through the motions, because I think sometimes, say, underdogs, when they go into games, and I'm talking about from the Forest perspective here, if you allow the other team to just move the ball slowly and so on and so forth, it becomes quite easy for them because you don't need to break your stride to do something progressive. Whereas I think sometimes for Arsenal, the way that I've seen them play, I think it's to Brentford. Brentford tried to press them. Arsenal beat the press and they were running at them full speed. You saw Saka, you saw Martinelli, you saw Jesus, and it was a really strong start. And by the end, Brentford were almost like they ran out of steam and ran out of belief. I think for that Arsenal side, given the results that you've had, if you start badly, before you know it, it almost feels like a mini crisis. But if you start well, I feel like things are back to normal. So I think it will sort of emphasise the importance of it. But it won't just be Arteta. It'll be Xhaka, it'll be the other senior players within that in terms of understanding, like, you know, especially if they're in second, come the start of the game, we want to get back to the top. This is how we're going to do it. Don't underestimate the opposition, because otherwise this could be a trap game for them.
Yeah. Nedum, it's your first time on Team Talks with us, and we've chucked you straight in at the deep end and got you to do our Premier League predictions for the weekend. So, well, Brendan Rodgers will be pleased that his side have improved recently before facing Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, and there are doubts over whether Erling Haaland is fit for the game or not. How big a difference will it make?
Well, 17 goals in the Premier League season, it's probably going to make a big difference, but City, they do have the quality to go out and win there without him. I think we've seen that over the last 2 seasons with the way that, you know, they've won 2 titles, finished in the 90-plus point bracket. But it does make a big difference, not least of all for people from a fantasy football perspective, we could say.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I think it's an interesting time for City. At that game midweek, I thought they did quite well, but they did be disappointed they didn't score. And then going back to the week before against Brighton, I think Brighton probably deserved more from that game. So City ended up showing the quality in the end. But that was a tough encounter, and I think they're expecting the same thing this weekend away at Leicester.
I think Premier League fans were warned about the potential injuries that Erling Haaland has picked up previously in his career, Andy. This one doesn't look too serious, though, does it? No,
it doesn't, but he's had a lot of niggles that have turned into something bigger earlier in his career. Now, some put that down to Marco Rose's training programme at Borussia Dortmund last season. Of course, he's no longer there. When he was at Borussia Mönchengladbach, a lot of their players got muscle injuries. Now, you know, that's just a theory, so we don't know, but I think it's worth having a look at him. And, you know, it does... You still have the sense that he's growing into his body a little bit.
How?
Even if he's not
22. That's the thing, he's 22.
Even if he's not actually growing. I mean, I'm hoping he's not 6'10" by the time he's 25. That would be weird.
By tomorrow.
But it's possible. But I think because he's getting used to using his body, if that makes sense. Because if you looked at Haaland, having never seen him played, you wouldn't imagine him playing like he does. I mean, it's a bit like Kevin Durant in basketball. He's got like the little guy's skills in the big man's body, and I think that takes a while to get used to. Really, well, I think especially for muscle stuff, they've got to be super careful with him. There's no point taking any risks, is there?
No, there probably isn't. But he's in such an interesting situation because he's not going to the World Cup.
Yeah,
I think most of the stars that we see throughout the league, they are. So you're worrying more about sort of managing loads because that time away is going to be out of your hands, basically. And you can't say don't play him in the first game because of whatever. But you'll be itching to play, be itching to win. And that's one of the sort of paradoxes about players. I feel like we spend more time from the outside saying people might be tired and we need to take care of them. But the players themselves, you just want to play. You know, be absolutely itching to do that. And maybe, you know, he's had the injuries in the past. But he's got 17 goals in the Premier League. It's arguably the best one he's ever been in his career. So to keep him on the sideline, even if he's, say, just 90%, it's going to be a tough decision. If
he isn't fit and Pep Guardiola doesn't want to risk him, then he's already said that Julian Alvarez will start up top for Manchester City. We haven't seen a great deal of him yet, but what have you made of the appearances we have seen so far?
Everything we've seen. He looks ready. which, to be honest, I wasn't really expecting, not having seen much of him in South American club football. But people I do know who watch a lot of South American club football said that they shouldn't loan him. Obviously, that's not really the Guardiola way anyway. He likes to get them on the City page rather than send them off somewhere else. You know, there were points where Phil Foden could have been loaned out, and he said, well, stay here. And it proved to be the right decision overall. So, look, every time Alvarez has got anywhere near a sniff, he looks ready. I think it'll be really interesting, even though Leicester have improved at the back recently.
Yeah, well, this is the first kick-off of the weekend. It's the lunchtime game on Saturday. So if Manchester City win, then they actually go top of the table above Arsenal. Psychologically, how could that affect Arsenal heading into their game?
What's the different look, for Arsenal? They were doing so well. They're winning 90% of the games or whatever it was. It was an absolutely incredible run. I think some people were sort of disregarding the fact that they were getting those wins because it was against this team or against that team. But that's how you finish with 80, 90 points at the end of the season. It's not purely because you beat the top 4, top 6.
Yeah.
So they were really accruing points very, very well. But now it feels like there's a bit of a slip up. They drew a game, they lost the game, and then by the time they're kicking off, they're not top anymore. I think there's an expectation amongst some that they'll fall off. So it's a different sort of question if they do actually start that game in second. Because now it feels like it's definitely a race. All of a sudden it just ramps up just that little bit more. But, City have felt that before, and it'd be a good test for the young Arsenal side, I feel.
Yeah, so a defeat tonight. And it really does pile the pressure on Arsenal, doesn't it?
It does. I think they're fortunate because I know Zurich won tonight, but they hadn't won in the previous 13 games, so it's a bit of a gimme for Arsenal. But it's unnecessary in some respects, and I think that at this moment in time they're going through a little bit of a difficult period where the squad is looking a little bit stretched and a little bit tired. They were poor second half against Southampton at the weekend, but this period was bound to happen. But they're still in a good position with regards to the group.
Yeah, OK. Well, look, the pressure, was certainly there from that first half. The chances were coming there for PSV, a couple of disallowed goals as well. But the introduction of Luke de Jong, all that experience, that focal point as well, he really changed the game, becoming a provider and a scorer.
It's amazing there's still a role for a big centre forward. And he played really well. He used his experience. He's a fantastic player who comes with a brilliant CV. And when you get older, Resh, sometimes you get lots of experience and you know the game. Holding gets too tight. He had a real impact. Even the little ball there, the weight of pass was correct. He was a nuisance for the back line when he came on the second half. Never been blessed with the greatest pace in the world, but a really, really good football brain. Technically, very, very good. And for a young, vibrant side, he was like the perfect number 9 for them, using his brains and having all that legs in and around him.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Don's right. You've got Gakpo and Seamans running off him. They could be a little bit more direct and go into him, but he holds the ball up well and releases the likes of Seamans and Gakpo. And they were a big threat in the second half. Yeah,
we're going to be looking at a few of those threats actually in a moment. But for Luke de Jong as well, he did get his goal in the end. And he deserved it, didn't he, for the impact he had?
Yeah, he did an assist. And I've got to say, Ramsdale, if he comes, he has to get that. I think Tierney bodies de Jong, but if Ramsdale stays in his line, he saves this easily. But the fact he's committed himself, it's an easy header in the end. He just has to get it on target. He does, and then it was a really long way back for Arsenal. No way back, but he was the difference tonight, de Jong.
He certainly was, and Ramsdale certainly won't want to watch that one back. But you mentioned Simons and Gakpo, 2 players who really were a handful in that first half. Real bright sparks as well. I feel like there'll be big clubs with their eyes on them. They've already been on Gakpo, but I think Simons is sort of, having his moment.
Yeah, fantastic young players. I mean, Gakpo on the radar of Man United. They've been trying to get him for quite a while. But I thought Seamans caught the eye tonight, Xavi Seamans. He's still a young boy, only at 19. This is Gakpo's finish, but he's been around. He's been at PSG and Barca. He's went right through the Dutch levels from under 15s to 21s. And these two, I thought, when you've got good technical players with experience like De Jong showed in the second half, you need this youth, you need this skill. And Simons has got this. Look, they're afraid of him in the 18-yard box. They don't want to touch him. They're petrified of his skill and his pace. In the end, it was another offside goal, which cost them. But in terms of 2 bright young players that I'm pretty sure all the scouts and all the big European clubs will keep an eye on, I thought those 2 caught the eye.
I mean, he wasn't getting enough game time at PSG, and I think we understand that, Simons. And, he's gone to PSV now, and he's playing regular football, but you can see he's a real talent. And those runs in behind, that run from Gakpo and Seamans, they were a feature of PSV, especially in the second half. Gakpo had a bit of a nasty habit of getting caught offside on the evening, but finished a couple of chances really, really well. But just stay on side.
Yeah, just stay on side.
It's a learning curve.
Yeah, I mean,
Too keen.
Too keen,
That's
but you
it.
know they're very young and they want to get the job done.
Exactly.
And they were up against, Arsenal did very well in the defensive side on those chances. Interestingly, though, there's a really nice stat that's come out. If you're Ruud van Nistelrooy, that is. I think it's a bit of an unwelcome omen now for Arsenal. Back in 2004, October the 24th, his goal ended Arsenal's 49-game unbeaten run.
Wow.
18 years and 3 days later, on October the 27th, as manager of PSV, he's ended Arsenal's 9-game unbeaten run.
Rude awakening.
Isn't it?
Very good.
Had you been keeping that without telling me?
Saved it.
You really had, hadn't it? OK, well, look, PSV are in action next week. They're against Bodo Glimt. But for Arsenal, I mean, they are in a good position, as you say, but they do want that top spot. They don't want to be playing that extra game. And Zurich, whilst they've been bottom of the table, they did give them a hard time on match day one.
They did, but I think Arsenal would be delighted where they're at. They'd have won the game tonight, of course they would have done, but to put themselves in a better position. But as I think Mikel Arteta said there, it's been a long campaign, in terms of how many games you've had to play, including the Premier League. And they would have took going into Zurich at home, match day 6, qualifying, because they will. They'll beat them.